What's good? What's good? What's good? What's good?
Hey, family, what is good? What a consequential time we are in these last hours before Election Day, or some of you may actually be watching this on or after Election Day. Your friends at Values Engage wanted to use this special space that we've created every month for our What's Good Town Hall to connect you with some really, really important information and resources and some amazing people that may be helpful to you in the next few hours and in the days ahead. This is such a consequential election. So many of our rights, our freedoms are on the ballot. And we want to make sure that you have the information you need to make wise decisions, but also want to make sure that your vote is protected. So, in just a bit, we have really, I think, our country's leading voice when it comes to election protection. And that means protecting you at the polls if you face any challenges. His name is Damon Hewitt, and he's the head of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. They're the ones that manage the 866 Our Vote hotline. And I can't wait for you to hear from Damon about some really, really important resources that he's going to share. You're also going to hear today from our dear friend, Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. Dr. Skinner is doing amazing work in lots of different areas, but she's also working to mobilize lawyers and clergy at the polls in a nonpartisan way to ensure that our polling locations are free from intimidation or violence and more. And so Barbara Williams Skinner is going to share about that. But first, I personally wanted to start and share some information with you about not actually the election, but about what may happen after the election. Listen, I am very, very hopeful that we are going to have a smooth election day this year in 2024. I am hopeful that everyone watching this and those around the country gets out to vote. You vote your values, and that those votes are counted and a winner is determined, and we're able to move forward peacefully as a country. But we want to make sure that you feel prepared and empowered in the event of any challenges in the coming days, problems at the polls, disputed election results, and so forth. We're not anticipating these things. We are hopeful that this will be a smooth process, but we wanted to share some information with you so that you can walk into these next few days with confidence and with calm. And so, want to share a few resources for you that may be helpful to you in the days ahead. First, want to start on election day itself. And again, Damon's going to share more about this, but you'll see a graphic that says what to do if you face a problem at the polls. One of the most important things you can do is contact the phenomenal folks at Election Protection. They are resources for you, attorneys and others who can support you in responding to any questions that you may have. You see some phone numbers here. The one I want to call out most importantly is 866 Our Vote. Again, that's 866 Our Vote. That line is going to be staffed 24/7 to ensure that you can receive support if you need help as a voter. There are also some other ways that you can reach out based on linguistic preferences. You can also text My Vote to 866-687-8683 to get voting help from a trained volunteer via texting. And you can engage on social media, and you see the handle there for 866 Our Vote. But again, if you face issues at the location where you are trying to vote, reach out to the folks at Election Protection. So that's on election day. Now let's talk about some of the other pieces about this election that may unfold in the coming days. And again, we are hopeful that everything is so smooth, straightforward, and that our democracy proceeds without a hitch. But we do want to prepare you just in case some other things happen. So first, we want to talk about spotting misinformation and disinformation in this election season. Again, spotting misinformation and disinformation. There are a range of people that are out there that are quite frankly trying to distract and divide and share information that is just not true. And it's going to be really important for us as consumers of information. We are all reading the news or on Facebook or online. It's going to be important for us to check our sources. And so that's the first note here in terms of spotting misinformation and disinformation is check the source. Trust only reputable news outlets and official election sources. If this is forwarded by your cousin and you can't see who it came from, if it's a reshare on Facebook and the information in that image that is being shared has not been verified, I want you to treat it circumspectly. You really need to check and make sure that whatever is being shared with you is being reported by multiple reputable sources before you believe it. You can also check on websites like Snopes and factcheck.org and PolitiFact to make sure that the information that you are receiving is vetted and verified, and certainly do that before you pass anything along to others. So that's the first thing, is check your sources. The second thing you can do is look out for common red flags. These are the things that should set your antennas off because they're often associated with misinformation and disinformation. Charged or inflammatory language that's trying to stir up your emotions and encourage you to pass this along, forward this now, etc., without verifying. You need to look out for stuff like that. You also need to make sure that everything has a link that's backed up by sources. I don't know if y'all remember in high school and in college where they say cite your sources. Well, the stuff that we share needs to be cited as well. And so see if it's backed up by sources. Also, you can frequently find misinformation and disinformation includes grammatical errors, typos, irregular formatting. If it looks a little funky, if it looks a little funny to you, again, treat it with great care. The next thing, and this is sort of new in this cycle, is you have to watch out for fake or altered images and videos. Folks are using AI and other tools in lots of different ways that can make things seem as if they aren't. One of the things you can do is use Google's reverse image search tool to help determine if a photo or video is authentic. You can look for clues that it may be what's called a deep fake, which is a fake that really looks real. Sometimes there's blurred backgrounds, unnatural movements, odd facial expressions. It's the little things, but that can help you spot a potentially deep faked video or image. And then remember, there are lots of what's called bots out there, y'all. Bots are people that are computers claiming to be people, and they're posting comments, they're posting tweets and so forth, and they're not actually real. And so be mindful that there are bots that are out there, and if you see a bunch of people coming together with the same message at the same time, look at their account activity and see if you notice an unusual amount of identical statements, or one account that's saying the same thing over and over again. It might be a bot. It might not be an actual real person. It might be created to distract and divide us. And so watch out for fake and altered images and videos. Also want you to be really, really cautious and careful with breaking news or early claims of results. There may be folks who try to rush out there and say that this thing is theirs, or that the other candidate has not won, and so forth. Go to state and local government election websites or trusted news outlets for verified information. Just because one person is saying it does not mean that it's true, and want to really, really lean on trusted information in this time. So again, that's just some basic notes about spotting election misinformation and disinformation. Now, let's talk a little bit about the election process and how we know that there is a certified winner. So remember, first, just trust in the process overall. Election results can take time. I'm hopeful that this will be resolved on election night or immediately after, but sometimes they take time, often several days or even weeks to be certified. If you take it upon yourself to tap into those reliable sources, state election websites, federal election websites, well vetted news sources, that will help you know when the results are final, and that you'll be able to be patient and calm as you're checking those sources as the process unfolds. There are 5 sources that I'd love for you all to be familiar with as you're seeking to verify election information. The first is state election websites. Each state has an official election website, and social media channels that keep voters updated in real time. The National Association of Secretaries of States maintains a directory of these official election websites. So that they're called the National Association of Secretaries of States. They can point you to those state websites. That's a great way to know when election has been certified. Also, there's the Federal Election Commission, the FEC. The FEC website is a trusted source for understanding how federal elections are regulated. States handle the voter counting and so forth, but the FEC is a great resource as well. Also, familiarize yourself with USA.gov. It's access for verified election resources, ways to avoid misinformation. And this next one is important. It's a agency many folks have not heard of, but it's a cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency. They publish real-time updates on election security issues. So if there's any hacking, any craziness, as well as fact-checking information through their rumor control page. CISA is a great resource to understand the difference between rumors and facts when it comes to our election. And so all of these you can just sort of Google or use your preferred search engine to find these state election websites, as well as the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency. And the last note is the National Association of State Election Directors. They support state election directors, and their website is an excellent resource for accessing verified information from state level sources. The National Association of State Election Directors. So again, these 5 resources: state election websites, the Federal Election Commission, USA.gov, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the National Association of State Election Directors, are great additional resources in addition to well-vetted news sources for fair and unbiased election information. And lastly, just remember, just a friendly reminder to everybody, our democratic system is built on integrity and accountability. If we remain calm, if we trust official sources, if we trust not just one person saying one thing and people trending on social media, but if we lean into official sources, our democracy, our democracy is going to remain strong, period. But we can assist the process of this election by trusting those official sources. Our system does not tolerate violence or conspiracy theories that undermine the democratic process. There are laws in place to uphold accountability and to protect our democracy. Let's stick to the facts, y'all, and respect the process that keeps us all connected and protected. So listen, I want you to know that we are all praying for and trusting that election day is going to go smoothly. And I believe that it is. But first and foremost, we want to protect your right to vote. You're going to hear from Damon Hewitt and Barbara Skinner on that shortly. And then as the process unfolds, where results are going to be shared, we are going to use trusted resources. We're not going to reshare misinformation or disinformation. And we're going to know that our democracy is bigger than any one man. It is stronger than any one political campaign, and it is built to last. And we're going to trust in that in the days ahead. Thank you so much. Now check this out from Damon Hewitt.
Thanks, Joshua. I can't think of a more important conversation for us to have less than a week out from the election, or a more timely guest. Damon Hewitt is the president and executive director at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, where he and his team work on voter protection. He has more than 20 years of civil rights litigation and policy experience, and was the inaugural executive director of Executives Alliance for Boys and Men of Color, a philanthropic network of more than 36 national and local foundations focused on shifting policies, structures, and false narratives that negatively impact our nation's sons and brothers. He's also spent more than a decade previously at the NAACP's Legal Defense and Education Fund. So let's just say this brother's qualified to come and help us figure some things out tonight. Damon, it's great to see you. Welcome to What's Good.
So great to be with you, Sharice, and appreciate Joshua and the team for really getting the message and getting the word out about what's relevant, what our community needs to be thinking about, focused on, and how we should show up right now.
Well, thank you. We're so glad to have you on tonight. Before we dive in, we want to hear a little bit more about you. How did you become interested in doing this work?
I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's a city and a state that is beautiful in terms of culture, Black culture and all types of culture, but also brings you a bit of a gumbo, a mix of experience. You know, it's the home of Plessy v. Ferguson, separate but equal. That's where the case went down. It's the home of Ruby Bridges and the other young girls who were part of the New Orleans Four, who integrated public schools in the city. I went to LSU for college. It's home of Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player, Donna Brazile, the political strategist, but also David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the KKK. So that's the kind of gumbo that we're in. And so in some ways it's in the blood. It's been with me my entire life. And, I started off as a history major, and my first class was Louisiana history. And if you know anything about Louisiana history, it's all about politics. And that brought me to political science, and then to law, and then to education policy, and all the things that we do on voting rights. Finally, I'd say there are some really important major lawsuits, including Supreme Court cases, cases called Major v. Treen, Chisholm v. Romer, people like Barbara Major, Ron Chisholm, people who are, I've actually got to meet, who are still alive, right? And living legends in Louisiana. I was also had the great benefit of being a research assistant and mentee of the late great Lani Guinier, whose book is right across my shoulder here. One of her books, Lift Every Voice. And so Lani was ahead of her time as a visionary on what true participatory democracy could look like. And so she's gone from this earth now, but stays with us in terms of all the ideas and energy and focus and commitment she brought to the table. So everything we do is on the shoulders of people like that. And we want to make sure we pay it forward so we keep building that future that we believe we deserve.
So this work is clearly in your DNA. It's really who you are. One of the threats that seems even more prevalent this election cycle is the threat of private actors using misinformation, AI, etc., to push conspiracy theories meant to deceive the electorate, often with a political intent. Can you tell us what efforts are in place to address some of this misinformation?
We are, through the Election Protection Coalition, which we at the Lawyers Committee co-convene, there are various working groups. And election protection, by the way, is the nation's oldest and largest nonpartisan voter protection coalition, over 300 organizations. And in years like this, it's closer to 400 because new groups tend to join. But we have various working groups, and one of them is on election misinformation and disinformation. Our friends at the organization Common Cause are the lead for that working group. And what we do is we track calls that come into the election protection hotline. 866-OUR-VOTE is the hotline. And you can go online at 866-OUR-VOTE.org or text or do Facebook Messenger or even WhatsApp chat to reach us. So when voters reach out to us, we document anything that they're reporting as mis and disinfo. We also hear about it from other sources as well. And so what we do is we interface with tech companies, with election officials at the local and federal, state and federal level, but we also file litigation too. In 2020, we heard about a rather primitive, but sadly effective form of disinformation. There were a series of robocalls that were targeting Black voters, telling them that if you vote by mail, the information will be used against you by creditors to collect outstanding debts, by law enforcement to execute outstanding warrants, and even by the Centers for Disease Control to force mandatory vaccines. At the end of the call, the voice says, "Don't give your information to the man." And it turns out it was two white guys who hired a Black woman as a voice actress to record this script. And they tried to target 85,000 Black voters. So we were able, fortunately, to sue and get a preliminary injunction from a federal court to stop those robocalls before Election Day. And even New York Attorney General Tish James intervened and joined on our side of the litigation. We ultimately won the case. These people were fined by the Federal Communications Commission, an historic multi-million-dollar fine. They were even prosecuted in 2 jurisdictions. And we also secured our own $1.2 million judgment against them as well. So we sent a message to them, and even the robocall company who helped them do it, they say unwittingly, right? But we sued them and they settled quickly. that this kind of thing isn't appropriate, it's not tolerated, and it violates federal civil rights law. But that doesn't stop folks from still trying. And with the power of artificial intelligence, we fear that it could be happening under our noses and we not even know it, because they could clone your voice, they could clone Barack Obama's voice, they could clone Oprah Winfrey's voice, and it's hard to distinguish what's real and what's not. So we really encourage everyone to don't just wait and assume everything you receive is real. Go to your trusted messengers, your trusted sources, and find the real information that you can really rely on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any other examples that people this election cycle you think they should be keeping an eye out for? The robocall example is such a good one, because you know that it's meant to incite fear and keep people from going out to vote. Are there other things that people should be looking for?
Well, because so many of us engage on social media these days, it's not just about specific information that may be perceived as factual information. It could also be just narratives about candidates or elections themselves. So, for example, it's well documented that during the 2016 election, there were Russian agents who created fake bots, fake online accounts with fictitious names to basically socialize amongst Black folks. Hey, we shouldn't vote. This is why you shouldn't vote. And so I think that's not about one candidate or another, or one party or another. That's really about kind of a meta narrative about the value of voting in the first place.
Absolutely.
And so I think we have to watch out for that kind of stuff as well. And then, frankly, I hate to say it, but even the way the mainstream media reports, major networks and even print outlets, I'm not saying they're not trustworthy. I will not say that. But what I'm saying is they, in the course of reporting the news, sometimes they're restating, well, X person says Y. And if it's not fully fact-checked or debunked, then you can inadvertently be a vector for spreading information that, if not false, at least is close to the line, just enough to confuse.
Absolutely. We know that in the US, there's no single entity that officially declares the winner of election. So you were just talking a lot about going to reliable sources. We know that counting and certifying election results can take several days, or as we've seen, even weeks. With all of these mixed messages circulating on election night, where should people turn for reliable information? Where would you recommend they go?
Well, if you're looking for information about election results, the best bet is the Secretary of State's office website, or whoever the election official is for that state. They typically have results. You know, media can give you analysis and opinions. And again, they don't usually get it absolutely wrong. I don't think that's the case. But part of what they're doing is not telling you a fact of what votes are. They're telling you prognostications, right? And so at some point, the Associated Press will make a call. And then, other major networks, say, well, AP's called it and we're going to call it too, right? But they all have their war rooms, their newsrooms, there's their experts. They may have sleeves rolled up as if they're, have their hands literally in the numbers. And so I don't mean to discredit any of those folks, but if you want results about who actually prevailed, then the official accounts will be available through a Secretary of State. With the Lawyers Committee and Election Protection, we don't make it our business to declare who is the winner of each and every election. What we do, however, is we want to instill confidence in the processes, the apparatus, the systems, the structures that are in place. And we will certainly vigorously defend against any false claims or any litigation even that are designed to overturn the will of the people. And that means subverting elections, subverting the actual legitimate election results. So, for example, after the 2020 election, we represented the NAACP at their invitation in about 15 different lawsuits that were filed in various parts of the country, including Michigan, where I think it was the state director of the NAACP was one of the lead clients there, I believe, because there were people who were trying to use state court systems to say the election results should not be certified. And so we lifted up the voice of Black leaders and Black voters in those matters. We're already doing that pre-election now, because in Georgia, there have been two cases we've been involved in. One is one in which there was a so-called hand count rule from the State Board of Elections which said that every vote cast by every Georgia voter must be voted by hand on election day, which really is an impossible task. It would take days, frankly. But also we thought that was designed to gum up the works and slow down the process. The other case we were involved in is one in which some election officials suggested that certifying election results was merely discretionary, not mandatory. And so we had to get involved in that case as well. If that kind of litigation sprouts up again post-election, we'll be involved. And so we want people to know that just because somebody claims there's fraud doesn't mean there's fraud. Just because somebody claims that they think their candidate really won when every other indication says otherwise, it doesn't mean that's the case either. We are fully on alert for false claims post-election. It is sadly a fact that a reality likely that we have to deal with.
Well, thank you so much, Damon. If folks are having trouble at the polls, if they've got questions, tell us again what they should do.
Number one thing, call 866-OUR-VOTE, 866-OUR-VOTE. You can also find us in Facebook Messenger and on WhatsApp. You can even text 866-OUR-VOTE directly and get a response in real time for one of our trained attorney volunteers. We have thousands of attorney volunteers we recruited and trained. We have a legal manual specific to the laws of every single state. And remember, the laws have changed since 2020 in terms of access to voting and how you can vote. If you find a problem at the polling site, here's something that's really important for everyone to remember. Don't leave and just give up. Don't leave and think you're going to come back later because you may not have the time or it might be too late. People have to work, people have kids, people have lives and responsibilities. And then there's unforeseen things like traffic or traffic jams and what have you, right? So don't leave the polling place and be turned away. Call 866-OUR-VOTE. Our trained attorney volunteers can guide you on what your options are, which may include submitting a provisional ballot that could still be counted, even if you otherwise would be turned away. Provisional ballots are required for federal elections, for federal races. So you have options and don't let them turn you away. Don't let them win. Fight for your right.
You guys heard it, 866-OUR-VOTE. Damon, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about how we can protect our vote.
Thank you. Look, you see my sticker that I voted, and whether people wear stickers or not, I want to know that everybody out there has cast their ballot. And when you do that, we're going to fight to make sure your vote really does count.
Thank you. Pass it over to my friend Scott Buckout to introduce our next guest.
Thank you so much, Charisse. Friends, it's so good to be with you all, and I am so excited to introduce someone who I have had the pleasure of working with and considering a friend and a mentor for such a long time. Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner is the CEO and co-founder of the Skinner Leadership Institute. She's the co-convener of the National African American Clergy Network and of Faiths United to Save Democracy, which is this nonprofit, nonpartisan, multiracial group that organizes and trains lawyers, clergy, lay leaders to be poll chaplains, peacekeepers, and people who protect the right to vote. And so far in this election cycle, they have trained over 500 folks to be poll chaplains for this upcoming election day. And I'm so excited to introduce you because she is a woman of deep faith whose faith prompts her to action. And so, Dr. Williams Skinner, welcome to What's Good. We're so honored to have a chance to have a conversation with you.
Thank you, Scott. It's really good to be here.
Program. Yeah.
Great to be here.
I'm so glad you are. So can you tell us the story of how Lawyers and Collars and how that program got started?
Yes, the Lawyers and Collars started actually during the Obama administration, unofficially, when the anti-voting measure started in North Carolina, when the then governor said that with precision, they were going to restrict the Black vote. They were not even, subtle about it. And so we began to mobilize the denomination leaders, the AME Zion, COGIC, CME, Church of God in Christ, as well as all the Baptist groups, and said, hey, no more silos. We have to do this together. Yeah. Because they're coming for our lunch. And so we're in this together, and we started. It was in 2018 that we connected and partnered with Sojourners and with Jim Wallace, Reverend Jim Wallace, and now Reverend Adam Taylor. And that's when we really began to say, you know what, you can't do this from Washington. You have to have people on the ground in the states that matter, the battleground states in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Arizona and North Carolina. You have to have people on the ground, pastors who've been at this for a long time, bringing alongside them the millennial and Gen Z pastors to say, we're going to be like the watchman on the wall. We're going to make sure that on our watch, no elderly person gets denied, a wheelchair or support in line, and no Latino person or person with language challenge gets, denied a language interpreter so they could exercise their rights to vote. And that's when we really got started with lawyers and college. The idea was simply ordained pastors in their clergy collar. We had imams, we had rabbis, and we had Christian pastors. We had mainline, we had conservative churches, we had Black churches, we had Latino churches. And they went to polling sites that were usually the ones with trouble in the past, right? Late ballots, close early, when people are still at work, or open late when people have to go to work and they're on hourly wages, all kind of nefarious stuff, all kind of drama. And so we connected, and we had the pastors alongside the lawyers at the lawyers committee. And that's how we came up with the name Lawyers and Collars. And so throughout that election, we would have, if we had to call a Secretary of State and say, hey, this place needs to get open so these people can get to work, they can vote and go to work, we had to do that. And that's how we got started.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I feel like that is such a high calling as a clergy person, to be a poll chaplain for the day. And I love how you describe these little moments of like the things and the duties and the responsibilities that you are kind of a presence at a poll for election day. So what does it take to be a poll chaplain? Like, how do you train them for the role that they're going to be serving?
So we started out with just ordained pastors, but a lot of young people wanted to be part of this who were not ordained, but they were lay leaders. They were, choir members. They were, Bible studies or whatever. They wanted to play a role. And so we changed it in 2022 election, the midterm, to poll chaplain. And then we morphed into poll chaplain and peacekeepers, which is we are now. So we have ordained and lay leaders. We had 7 trainings from July 15th to October 10, 90-minute sections that they have by Zoom. By the way, we have trained over 900
oh my gosh.
today, Scott. Yes, in the 10 states. Half the time they learn, what does a poll chaplain do? Well, you show up ready. You show up to watch what's going on. You show up ready to help people online. You've been trained through the 1-866 Our Vote hotline to know what to tell people if they're at the wrong polling site. If there are no wheelchairs, 40% of the polling sites in Black communities had no wheelchairs. And we had elderly people coming. We had people finally, the laws were passed in 2021 that says you could go to jail for giving people food and water. A very good Samaritan act like that could land you in jail. And so we have gone to, now we had 1,400 people to sign up, and out of those 900 have actually gone through the training and have been given assignments, all from Arizona, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina. Notice these are battleground states: Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, and Wisconsin. And they are going, now this time what we did, we got more granular. So we did research. What were the over 20% poverty zip codes? And what are the churches in those? And thank God for Values Partnership, because your summer intern helped to do this, to ferret out what were the most vulnerable polling sites. And so we said, look, if we're going to really serve as unto the Lord, then we should serve the people who are the most vulnerable, the least of these, our brothers and sisters. And so we told all of our middle class pastors and lay leaders, hey, no gated communities. We're going to go where the need is. And so that's where we're going. And we're really excited. We have some out there now at the in the early voting
Oh, wow.
in Wisconsin and in North Carolina, in Georgia, and other places. They're out there now. Tomorrow is the last day of early voting for most, and then they're ready on Tuesday for Election Day to serve all day long.
That's amazing. Just to imagine a small band of people of goodwill, 910 important states around the country on Tuesday, working together to create peace where there might be confusion, to create order where there might be questions. And so it's dawning on me, what advice would you have for someone who comes to their polling place and they notice something irregular or they have a challenge voting when they shouldn't? What resources are available to them, or what steps should they take? And maybe this is some of the advice that you give to poll chaplains as well, or to the lawyers committee.
Yeah, so good question. So part of the training was in peacekeeping. We use really the method that people use in church, you know, in faith communities. You speak to people like they are made in the image of God. You speak to, we have had situations in the past, Scott, where we had bad actors, and just speaking to them in softer tones, saying, hey, you know, this woman you're intimidating, she's somebody's mother. This is somebody's grandmother. Would you want your grandmother spoken to like that? Like, we'll hear you. You don't like what's going on in the country. We don't either. So they learn how to speak to people. First of all, most of the conflicts can be handled on a person-to-person basis using just the spirit of our faith tradition that teaches us that everyone, even the people we don't agree with, are created in the image of God, and they deserve to be treated with dignity. That handled 90% of the problems. But let's say it escalates. People showed up in Arizona with guns. These guys had long-drawn rifles in Arizona with militant, very militant, army-like uniforms on. Our guys just said to them, look, could you move back a bit away from where these seniors are trying to vote? They're not your problem. You know, again, speaking to them plainly, they have a right to bear arms. Their Second Amendment. We're not saying you can't bear arms. You cannot stand there and intimidate older people. Okay, you can't do that. So we just say, could you get, so they can't really see you and they can vote. We don't want anybody to leave this line. So would that happen? In Michigan, there were guys when the MAGA trucks, and I know this is all partisan, but reality. And so our guys, I think there were several African-American pastors. They had their collars on, and there were several white women working with them. They decided that the white woman would be better go and talk to the MAGA guy, the white MAGA guy, because that would be less intimidating. I mean, they use, you know, they use the teaching that says, you know, delegate to the right person. Sometimes it's an older person. Sometimes it's a younger person.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a Jewish person. Sometimes it's an imam. Sometimes it's a white or Latino person. So they asked her. So she got the conversation started, asked them to move away from this Black church so these young people could vote. And that happened. We had that in Ohio, a guy out yelling and screaming. So we say, these are the tips we give people. So number one, we let them know in advance the kinds of things that can happen, so they know in advance these are likely to happen. We tell them what intimidation looks like. Someone yelling and screaming, that's their First Amendment right. Yelling and screaming at someone and telling them to go back to their country, that's not acceptable because they are in their country, right? Right. So we have to use wisdom about when to intervene. We say that first, number one. Number two, you have your 1-866 Our Vote hotline. So if you run into a problem that seems legal, for example, if someone is an ex-felon, right, and they paid their debt to society, you have to understand whether or not they can vote by having paid all their fines. A lawyer could help you with that quickly, but a person standing there as a poll chaplain would know. So they have to know when to call for help. Yeah. Let's say it escalates to the point where there is actually there's actually a polling site open very late on purpose in poor community. In some cases, we worked collaboratively with Common Cause, with League of Women Voters, with the NAACP on the ground, and they had great contacts with the secretaries of state. We ourselves at MET, through our We Are Watching programs, with secretaries of state of Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania. So we knew some secretaries of state. We had cell phone numbers. So we were able to call them under certain conditions when it really needed to have some, if ballots ran out, for example, it has to. So we teach our poll chaplain peacekeepers, your main job is to be a moral and calming presence in a tense situation. That's your job. That you're not a Democrat or a Republican when you serve. You are a moral agent that day. Secondly, there's some tips for simple things that you can do. You can help get a wheelchair. You can ask a poll manager if there's an interpreter there for somebody who is language challenged. Those are things you can do. And then you have the conflict de-escalation tips, all the way from using your language, using your skills, using your love for people to de-escalate in simple terms, just by humanizing the situation, shifting the atmosphere and the energy from negative to positive. Then you have to be wise enough to know, hey, this is over my head.
Yeah.
This is over my head. I need to let the polling site manager know that this is about to go down. People are about to get physical. And you have to know that calling the police may not be a good idea, because you bring more guns, more weapons. And so you have to know wisely how to use your presence. And pastors know that. They do that all the time. And we train these people extremely well. And we're excited that we have people of all races and backgrounds going out, and they ain't scared. They're going out there to make a difference.
That's so beautiful. There's so much to the idea that if you don't move into a circumstance like that with fear, but actually with faith, that you are actually helping to create an environment of peace. That can be so powerful to de-escalate, but then knowing too that there's resources available to help. And so that even if the circumstance seems out of control in that moment, there's going to be lots of resources that can come to hopefully bring some order, to have respect for the rule of law, to help people who have the right to vote will ultimately win the day. But I just
there's one additional resource that I think is the best of all. We have a headquarters command center all day from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. when the polls close at the National Council of Negro Women. We have a team there of phone bank people who have all of the maps of each state. If someone goes to the wrong polling site, if a polling location, because of weather, this extreme weather has closed some polling sites, they closed polling sites the other day in Houston, Texas. We can handle most of those issues. And each person who goes out, they have my cell number, they have the cell number of the state lead, they have the 1-866 Our Vote hotline. They are fully equipped and they're very prepared.
That's awesome. Barbara Williams Skinner, one of the things that I've known about you for a long time is that you are an inspiration to me, and that you are very wise, but you're also really, really smart. And so thank you for creating this. And I'm hoping that in addition to that, you could share with us something that you see as good in the midst of a contentious election. What's something that gives you hope in these final days?
As an elder, what gives me hope is so many young people who are committed to doing their part to make a difference. They're not whining about, hey, you all left us a horrible world and it's your fault. They're out there. They're signing up. They're on Instagram. They're on TikTok. They're encouraging their fellow students to vote. They're telling them what their stake is in society. That is so exciting. Yeah. So when I go on Instagram and I see all that, I'm like, I am so encouraged. That's the good that I see.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I am so encouraged by you. So thank you so much, Dr. Williams Skinner, for joining us on What's Good.
Thank you.
Joshua, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, you all. Well, listen, I hope you found tonight's What's Good helpful. Feel free to come back to this over and over again. Use these resources in the days ahead. I am hopeful that we are going to have a smooth election day. I'm counting on everyone that is watching this to get out and vote. Make sure that your voice is heard, that you are doing your civic duty, that we are honoring our ancestors who fought and bled for this right to vote. It is incumbent upon us to do so. And it's also incumbent upon us to remain calm and balanced and focused on our democracy in the days ahead. No tyrant, no wannabe dictator, no individual is bigger than our democracy. And so we're going to rely on trusted resources. We're going to share trusted resources. We are going to know that the election is over and that a winner has been determined when trusted resources say it's so. And then once that happens, we're going to move on. We don't care about any craziness, distractions, any attempts to divide or reclaim the process. That's not our business. What is our business is our democracy, people casting their vote, those votes being counted, the winner ultimately being declared, and then us moving forward with those winners together. And that's what's going to happen in this democracy, no matter what any individual tries to do to distract us. And so, listen, your team at Values Engage, your friends over here are resources for you in the days ahead. I hope, again, that tonight has been useful, and we look forward to connecting with you on so many topics in the future. What's good, everybody? Have a wonderful evening.
What's good? What's good? What's good?